We'll open the room up for questions. I will take the mic and circulate around and try to get as close as I can to you. Can we start? See a show of hands? Let me come close here, Stacy.
Okay, so obviously 100 Years of Solitude is mentioned in the novel, but you mentioned lots of other novels. And my students who are reading the novel now are trying to find a pattern. Is there one, or is it a useless cause? Should we give it up?
Well, I sort of kept it real spontaneous. You know, as I was writing, I would think of a book at that moment, and I would put it down. And I figured if it popped in my head, it meant something to me. But not necessarily it means something in the novel. There's a couple of instances, for instance, the book that Joaquin loses in the university is in cold blood, and it happens during a murder moment, so it kind of goes together. And there's another scene where Joaquin is reading from Little Women, and there's a connection there because Libertad asks Joaquin if he took his mom across the valley of silence, or I think that was in the shadows, the valley of shadows, and so there's a connection there. And there's another moment where Libertad is at the house that Martin is building, and she's reading from the Old Gringo, and there's a passage that she reads where it says that that everybody had a home except for him and the clouds. And it sort of goes with Libertad's story in a way. That's the only part, but like party planning for dummies and, you know, ports of call in the Caribbean. Oh, I have a good anecdote about that one. The Frommer's Guide to the Caribbean and Ports of Call is the title. And I get a call from the editor when they were doing the book in Random House, and he says, the senior editor would like to know if you wouldn't mind, if it wouldn't be too much of a trouble, that you change that book from the Frommer's Guide to the Caribbean and Ports of Call to the Fodor's Guide to the Caribbean. And I said, and why is that? And he says, well, that's our title. The other one is the competitions. And I said, well, that's product placement, so. Anyway, I did change it, so. So we had a few little things like that, but that was a funny one.
Another question? Way over there. Go ahead, up here.
For the prison part of it, like, how did you do that?
Okay.
The prison part?
The research for the prison part. I wanted to go to American prisons and Mexican prisons and be able to see the differences and the similarities. So I had a really hard time getting into the American prisons. I sent letters to the warden, to the community relations director, and was just not being able to get in. And when I was about to rob a convenience store, I got the idea that instead, maybe I should go visit the nuns at the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and they have a criminal, women in criminal justice program. And I joined them as a translator volunteer, and I was able to sneak in that way. And it was great. I mean, there was a point where I was interviewing inmates, and I asked the chaplain, do you know somebody who's been here a long time? And he says, sure, Leslie here. She's been here 32 years. And here's this woman in her 50s, very elegant, very nice, very well-mannered and educated. And I talked to her for about half an hour. We ended up being good friends. We hugged, we kissed. I asked her, you can't ask them why they're there, it's bad manners. But if they say it, fine, but you can't ask. But I did ask her, you know, what bothered her from being in prison. And she said, well, my parents subscribe me to the LA Times, but when I get the paper, all the coupons are gone. And it really bugs me because the guards take my coupons. And I said, well, it's not like you're going to go to the Robinson's May sale or the Nordstrom's. It's like, she says, yeah, but they're my coupons. I mean, she was really protective about her coupons. And anyway, eventually, we finished our conversation. And on the way out, I asked the chaplain, she's really interesting. And he said, well, if you want to know more about her, there's a book about her. And I said, oh, really? What's the book? And he said, Helter Skelter. It was Leslie Van Houten, one of the Manson girls. We still correspond now once in a while. And, I sent her a prayer card of St. Jude, which is a saint for desperate cases. And because she's never coming out. And it came back to me. And with a little note from the security people, and said that I was not allowed to send any laminated cards because they sharpen them and use them as weapons. They're so creative. But anyway, so I did the American prisons, and then I went to Mexico. And that was easy. I brought my film Santitos and 2 big bags of popcorn that I got in donation from one of the local theaters. And I just walked right in and I said, man, I could have brought all these knives inside these popcorn bags and nobody would have even checked. But anyway, I got in and I screened the film and then I got to interview a lot of the inmates. And it was very interesting. Actually, one of the white collar, I should say, he was a former CEO of Aeromexico who had been caught in some sort of embezzlement, and I was interviewing him, and he told me that one of the drug lords from the cartel had asked him to be his roommate. He wanted to be the roommate of this CEO, and he said, well, you can't because you have a cat, and I'm allergic to cats. I mean, they have pets in the prison. And so the drug lord got really offended and had his family kidnapped. So the kids and the wife were disappeared for a couple of weeks, and then finally he figured out, the CEO figured out what the drug lord had done. And he says, what do you want? What do you want? I want you to get on your knees and apologize and invite me to be your roommate. Otherwise, your wife will never show up. So he had to do that, and currently they're roommates. So a lot of stuff happens in those Mexican prisons that, I'm not exaggerating when when I write about the beach and those adventures, even though I never found any beach or nail salon, but there were other amenities that were very interesting in the Mexican prison. If you're rich, you can have your bodyguard, you can have your maid, you can have somebody to do your laundry. And if you're poor, you're the bodyguard, you're the maid, you're the one doing the laundry, and everybody's happy. It's a whole economy there. But that's the research I did for the prisons. And I have come back, I have kept coming back. I started a book club actually in the California Institution for Women. And what I do is every quarter I select a book and I get it donated. I get about 200 or 300 copies donated to the prison. The inmates read the book, and then I invite the author to come in and have a discussion with the inmates. So I've sort of kind of like life imitating fiction thing, but it was kind of my way of thanking them, for being so gracious and so nice and volunteering their stories with me. And so right now I want to expand it to other prisons, so I'm hoping I can do that, and I'm working on it.
Go ahead with your question down here.
Compassionate and kind almost, well, matronly, of course, is not the proper word, but it really is. She was warm and indulging to all of her fellow inmates. Where did that come from within you? Why was she not a bestial person?
Where did the prison matron come from within yourself?
Uh-huh.
Within yourself? Why was she warm?
Well, you've seen a bunch of wardens in movies, like The Shawshank Redemption and things like that. You've seen a lot. They're all mean and nasty and evil and villain. And man. But I wanted another kind of warden. I wanted a warden that was motherly, maternal, that would have loved to be the principal in a boarding school. And that, yes, she was corrupt. She was very corrupt, because nobody is 100% good or 100% evil unless you are the Terminator or something like that. But in real life, we all have always the little angel and the little devil, and they're always fighting, and we're always in that fine line between good and evil. And so I wanted the warden to be, in that sense, a real person in terms of, she has her good things, she's a grieving mother, she lost her child, she doesn't know how to call herself. But at the same time, she cuts deals with all the vendors and with all the inmates and gets a cut, So I wanted her to suffer as well. I wanted her to be the victim of infidelity. How would she react, And of course, she buries the shrimp. So that's why I wanted that kind of warden. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Over here.
Twice.
CD for us?
Can you talk some CB?
Oh! First, let me ask, are there any truckers in the room? I wouldn't dare, to go off on the lingo like that, because it doesn't come natural to me. But I do know some words, and I do know some really interesting and funny imageries that they come up with, like the alligator, how would you call a piece of tire laying on the road an alligator? I love that. I think there's just so many cool images and words, and they're almost like metaphors. They're poetic. So maybe any trucker would like to pitch in and say, how's it looking over your shoulder? You got a picture taker at in the back. He's shooting in the back, which means there's a policeman with a radar and, slow down. Okay.
Another question? Let's come right here.
Hole in the offing?
Maybe. I hope so. Yeah, but you know how it is in the film business. You cannot say yes until opening night, and so I'm sort of still keeping my fingers crossed.
Another question?
You know from the beginning what the tragic accident was? When you began writing, did you know what it was going to end with?
Well, I wanted her to cause an accident. You know how accidents are, is like, they just happen, and it happened to her. It's not like, she purposely did it. I have always been very intrigued by the crosses along the Mexican roads. I don't know if you're familiar with that custom. In Mexico, if there's an accident on the road and somebody dies, the family, the relatives, set up a little altar. They put a cross with the name of the person, sometimes the photograph, and sometimes a piece of the windshield or whatever was left over. They just laid there next to the accident. And I think it's kind of gory, but at the same time, I think it has its beauty. And I take it as a cautionary tale, whenever I'm driving and I see the crosses, oh, I better slow down. And I guess a lot of people must do that, so it probably prevents more accidents. So this costume, I sort of wanted that image of having all these crosses, and have her come back and pay a tribute and ask for forgiveness, and I wanted to do that. So I figured that a good way to chop 24 people's heads would be with, the boom of a crane. And so they were minor characters, so okay.
Do you have another question? Let's come right here.
The novel, an aspect of the novel that was very interesting for me, it's sort of feminist and sort of anti-feminist. And the fact that Libertad is very capable, and she drives this truck, and in the end that she chooses that the name of the company will be Gonzalez and Father. But something kind of bothered me actually, well, two things, that she chooses the name, the nickname, Mujer de la Lorera, Mud Flap Woman, or whatever it was.
Mud Flap Girl.
Okay, I read it in Spanish. And I've always hated that symbol. I always see it because it has no individual characteristics. It's a sex symbol. It's just, big curves. And by choosing that nickname, to me, she was accepting the image that the truck drivers have of women. And yet, on the other hand, in some ways, she becomes very strong, very capable. And the other thing, the fact that she takes this capable role, she drives this truck, but then she ends up killing 24 people. It's kind of like the role of homosexuals in film and movies, because not now, but over history, gay people, when they first started appearing in books and movies, they appeared, but they had to die or go to prison or something, or do something awful, be evil. And so she becomes at the same time very strong, but at the same time commits this terrible act. And so to me there's this tension between sort of a feminist and an anti-feminist aspect of the book, and I wonder if you could comment on that.
Okay. Well, no more drinks. What this is from watching so many Hollywood movies where all the characters are black or white, there's no gray. And I like characters that have gray, that have, a wider, characters that have contradictions, characters that ask themselves questions, characters that are undecided as to, what to do about their lives and which position to take. Some characters are maybe not, they're not opinionated, and they're not, advocates of certain ideas. They may be going back and forth between one thing and another. In Esperanza's Box of Saints, maybe some of you have read it. Oh, thank you. The priest, Father Salvador, he loves Esperanza, but he has vowed chastity. He has promised God that he would not pay attention to women. But at the same time, he's torn because he loves this woman, right? So he's struggling with this notion, with this feeling. So that gives him more a three-dimensional, makes him more flesh and bone. I think that human beings, we are kind of like that, So, of course, Libertad is feminine in a way. She never had the example of a mother, but she met a lot of prostitutes in the brothels on the truck stops, and she knew the waitresses, and so she did have a certain female model or image, but she had to make her own. And she was not in tune with all the feminist movements. I didn't have her go to the main plaza and burn her bra. She was a self-taught woman, in a sense. And so, of course, there were contradictions. Of course, there were films, although he's very complex, I think. But that's basically why sometimes she might come off as, well, make up your mind. Are you a feminist or are you not, you know? Because it makes her feel more real.
We got another question down here.
Thank
Well,
you.
let's go to the gentleman. Go ahead.
You were going to run against the Terminator tomorrow, and you were campaigning on making your state and our country better. What would be your campaign speech?
What's your campaign speech against Arnold?
I would probably hire Esperanza to write it. To me, she's Terminator mom. Unstoppable. But I don't know. I mean, I would have to think about it, you know. I mean, I have seen a lot of actor politicians, but writer politicians, I haven't seen that. And I don't know if it's because we have a little more sense or because we're too busy creating alternative worlds that might, in some instances, be better than the real ones, you know. I'll owe you the speech. Maybe I'll write it someday.
Let's come down here again.
Okay.
A variety of wonderful narratives in her story, both written, it seems, the journal that she keeps with the clouds, which seems a little bit like a love letter to her mom, the toilet paper that she collects as an apology, and then the oral narratives, obviously. The central one is what she tells the inmates. And I'm wondering, is there one narrative that you particularly favor that seems to you the truest, that is really the essence of the story? Because all the inmates are going, she's full of, you know what, is this really, that doesn't look like the man she described. So is there one that seems truest to you or is closest to your heart?
What's the truest narrative?
For you?
Uh-huh. Did you all get the... no? Okay.
It was long. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, she's pointing out that there are several narratives in the story. First, there's the diary entries with the clouds and all that stuff that almost seems like a tribute to the mother. Then there's the third person, which is the normal narrative that moves the story along. Then we have the dialogues between the truckers, those little bits of conversations between chapters. Then we have the prisoners' dialogues, and then we have the first-person narrative of Libertad telling her story to the inmates as she pretends to read. And so there are many different ways of telling the story. And I did that because I get really bored very quickly. So to me, writing a novel in third person throughout, I just can't. It just, please get me out of here. I really would like to hear, for instance, I was curious, I'm always being curious, you know, what do people say once you leave the room, and some people stay in the room, you know, did you notice her pimple on her nose, you know, or whatever, you know, so I'm curious, so I sort of wanted to have this Greek chorus of what do anonymous truckers would say about my characters over the CB radio, and sort of complete the picture with their comments and whatever they were saying, their gossip, so to speak, about my characters. And I love that part because I had to learn the lingo and put it to practice and enjoyed it very much. But I love Libertad's narrative, her own account of events. I thought even though it may or may not be the truest one, at least it's her own, it's her words, it's her voice. And I really loved, it was almost like transforming myself when I went from third person into her narrative and just thinking differently. I was not an omnipresent narrator, but I was her. And it gets a little schizophrenic after a while. And my daughter one day said, "Mom, can't you be normal?" And that's really, really a very, very deep thought for a teenager. I mean, the fact... And I think she meant that she wished she could see me stuffing envelopes at her school, but that's something I could never do. I hate paper cuts. But it's a trait hazard as a writer. But anyway, I think that's the narrative that I enjoyed more, writing from her point of view.
We'll come up here.
Was Joaquin justified in his fear of the laws of reprisal, or was he just paranoid?
Was Joaquin just...
Is he just paranoid?
Well, you never know with the Mexican government. They can come after you 20 years after whatever you did, you know, and so in that respect, I think he was right to be paranoid, but I think that in the big scheme of things, what he did was really minor, and I don't think the Mexican government would take the time to go chase this little guy who did this to this captain, because those days of big political turmoil, a lot of much bigger things happened, and there were a lot of people covering their tracks, and it was really ugly. So in that sense, I think he was paranoid. He was, you know, obsessed with the idea that somebody was after him. I once read that one day this Korean guy came out of the mountains in 1984 or something like that and asked if the war was over. You know, he had been hiding in a cave for years and years. The war had been over a long time ago, and he came out, and he had like his long beard and long hair and totally malnutrition, you know, anyway. So I figured maybe Joaquin, you know, was totally overreacting, you know, to this incident. But these kind of paranoias feed themselves, you know, they get worse and worse, and it's all in their head. And I kind of got a kick out of a paranoid trucker, you know. You know, imagine being a trucker and always feeling that somebody is after you. Yeah.
Another question?
Yeah.
What do the wrestling angels signify? They're in both the novels.
What do the wrestling angels signify?
Oh, okay. All right. For those of you who've read Gonzalez and Daughter Trucking Company but have not read Esperanza's Box of Saints, you maybe noticed two little characters that that Libertad and her dad help change a tire on the road, and he's wearing wings and a wrestling outfit, and she gives Libertad Saint Anthony so she can put the statue upside down and find her a man. And these are the main characters in Esperanza's Box of Saints, is Esperanza and her wrestling angel. Now, in Gonzalez and Daughter Trucking Company, it's a cameo. Basically, that's what it is. I sort of wanted them to, you know, it's hard to let go. You know, it's like I kind of wanted them back in a small way, but I wanted a purpose. You know, I wanted them to have a purpose, not just drive by. And so that's why, you know, like Hitchcock or something. I really wanted them to have a bit in the stories, and that's why Esperanza gives Libertad the Saint Anthony that ultimately gives her Martin. But the meaning of the wrestler in Esperanza's Box of Saints is, here is somebody, I'm not going to ruin the story for those of you who haven't read it, but here is a woman who is not a mother anymore, she's not a daughter, she's not a wife. So what is she? And in order for her to become a woman again, after she was all these roles and ended all these roles, she has to go through this journey, and ultimately she becomes a woman, and then she's ready for the angel, for the wrestler. So that's almost a process that she has to go through. So that's the meaning, I would say. And of course, who doesn't want to be scooped up by an angel? Okay.
Another question? Come.
You said that your material conjugates over time, so I'm curious about what's next.
Oh, aha.
Next. Well, this is a story, what I'm writing now is a story about a family. The title is Forensics of the Heart. And is a story of a family of 3 daughters, and basically it's a story about divorce. But it's not, forget the lawyers. It's not about, the lawyers are the good guys in the story. This is a story where there are shamans and potions, and there's one scene where she goes to the shaman and says, he's with another woman, what can I do? And then he gives her a potion for the woman, and the woman drinks it, and she loses her teeth. So when they, so he doesn't kiss her anymore because the teeth are all rotted black. Like Charlize Theron's teeth in Monster. Yeah. Okay.
All right, right here.
I'm just tickled by the misspelled tattoo story you had in there. And I had to read that to my husband because he's tattooed his neck down. And I said, oh, maybe you have to hear this. It's so funny. But not funny. Why did you add that? Was that important? And did that come from a real story you heard or the Virginia?
Oh, well, no. I don't know. I've always been afraid of the spelling capabilities of tattoo artists. And so, what if I want to get a tattoo and he it's one of those fears that I have. So I wanted to use it in the story.
That's over? Okay.
And then, well, of course, being an English professor or a literature professor and have a typo on his skin is forever. Yeah.
We'll take one more question, if it's out there.
Can I ask 2?
You can try.
Did you run into any truckers who really hid their money around in odd places and were able to go back and find it?
No. No. I wish I had, and maybe I could, go help them dig them up. But no.
The characters have their sentences to be served, but also seem to have some say into when they were redeemed. Is there any basis in fact on that? If you're not ready to go out, you can stay a little longer?
There is a thing called institutionalization, which means that the prisoners grow accustomed to living in the prison, and so when they get out, they don't feel comfortable, they feel afraid or whatever, and so they go and commit a crime so that they can get back in. And they repeat that all the time on and on and on until they spend most of their lives in the prison. But in Mexico, there may be the possibility of somebody negotiating to stay longer. Anything is possible. So everything is negotiable. And if, you know, if this is a person that is probably helping the warden or has some sort of deal cut with some guard or something, they might be able to tweak the paperwork and stay longer. Yeah.
Let's give a big round of applause for Maria. She will be in the lobby. We'll be making our way up there right now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the story with me and for, I don't know, just thinking about my story and you and curled up in your special place where you read your books and sharing this story. It just creates a really wonderful, warm, intimate moment, and I thank you for that. I thank you for inviting me to your minds and for changing my story, because that's the point. You have to make it your own. Thank you.